Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, mysterious voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today, I want to talk about a play that I read from a familiar author, one that I think you can probably guess who I'm going to be talking about. But today's play is all about Scottish kings and betrayal. I am referring to Macbeth, or The Tragedy of Macbeth, by William Shakespeare, which was published around 1603. I've talked about Shakespeare on this channel before, so I don't need to go into that great of detail once again. But Shakespeare was a British author who was writing in the late 1500s, early 1600s, and wrote a number of plays as well as poems and sonnets and those sorts of things. And he's really well regarded for his work. And he studied all over, including in high school classrooms, at least in the United States. I don't know about other countries around the world, but I do know that he seems to be pretty popular in Western civilization, Western cultures. And there are a lot of questions something I frequently talk about is, did Shakespeare write his own plays? And what I've come to figure out, especially after reading this, is maybe that's the wrong question to ask. But the question to ask is, are we reading the original plays as Shakespeare wrote them? Because an interesting bit is that some people have noted, especially in Macbeth, that certain parts of the play were added afterwards. Like Shakespeare wrote them, time went on, and then some people might have discovered them or heard about them and decided to add some bits that they felt were missing, clearly changing, the meaning of the play, or just adding something that probably wasn't there before. Maybe not changing it too much, but changing it enough to give it a new meaning. And I think that's a very good question to ask, because it calls into question like how things change over time. It asks if things from the past are maybe necessarily the original format that they were written in, and are we getting the true Shakespeare, or just Shakespeare as deciphered by someone else? And I think it's probably the latter, which is a bit unfortunate. It doesn't necessarily say that Shakespeare was bad or anything, but it does kind of raise a lot of questions about what happened to the original Shakespeare. Like, what was that like, and was it of this similar quality to what we're seeing now? Given that people have kind of updated it, maybe not. Maybe people saw the flaws and decided to fix them, and so maybe Shakespeare is a collective group effort more so than anything else. What do you think? Tell me in the comments below. I think this is an interesting, if maybe somewhat pointless, because the dude is dead, line of discussion, but it is still one I think is worth having. And so without further ado, let's talk about Macbeth. I will do a summary, a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. So Macbeth focuses on a Scottish general named Macbeth, of course, as well as his wife, Lady MacBeth. She doesn't get her own first name. She merely is known as her husband's last name, which I guess was the thing at the time. But Macbeth serves under King Duncan and does a pretty good job. At the beginning of the story, we find out that he helped fight off the Irish as well as the Norwegians in helping King Duncan secure his territory in Scotland. And he's in fact promoted to the Thane of Cawford or something like that. And as he's walking with his friend Banquo around, he runs into a group of witches. Those witches tell Banquo that he is fated to have his line of descendants be the kind of heirs to the throne. And he's going to be somewhat successful, although not as successful as Macbeth. And Macbeth is fated to become, the Thane, but also the king, which after he's given that promotion seems a lot more significant. And he thinks about that quite a bit, and he even goes and tells his wife about it in a letter. And Lady Macbeth confronts him and says, "Hey, this sounds great. We should make sure that this comes true. We definitely want to be king, or royal royalty in a much higher position of power, and I'm sure you do too. Macbeth has some doubts, but his wife pretty much calls him a pussy. Tells him, you're not man enough if you're not going to try to become the king. And they both plot to murder Duncan while he's sleeping and blame the servants for it. And they're pretty successful, but Macbeth kills the servants before they can say anything to Duncan's son Malcolm or Macduff, who all flee to England because they're worried about being targeted next. Macbeth is then elevated to king, but begins feeling immense guilt about it even more. And Lady Macbeth has to tell him, shut up, we can get away with this if you just keep quiet. But Macbeth has feelings that Banquo, because of the prophecy, is gonna do something to try to hurt him. So he just straight up sends a bunch of murderers to go kill Banquo, have him assassinated. And then at a dinner, he sees Banquo's ghost, although nobody else can see it, and he starts ranting and rambling on to the point where all of his friends become weirded out, and Lady Macbeth begins having her doubts about whether this was even a good idea. Macbeth then goes and sees the witches again because he's increasingly worried that someone's going to try to take the throne away from him. I believe Hecate shows up in a scene that some people don't believe was depicted in the original. But Macbeth sees the witches and they tell him that the Birnam Wood is going to come against his throne, that he has to worry about Macduff, and that he won't be killed by any person who is born of a woman, which he all assumes and interprets to mean that he's invincible because, of course, a forest can't come visit him. And if no man born of a woman it can kill him, that means that nobody can kill him, which he interprets the witch's words in a very specific way there. But that no less stops his paranoia and growing guilt over everything that's been done. And so, in order to fully secure his throne, he goes and tries to kill Macduff at his castle. Macduff isn't there, he's fled to England, but he does kill Macduff's family, including his wife and child, which causes a war to be declared against Macbeth as people now view him as a tyrant. And Lady Macbeth feels so much guilt that she straight up kills herself, or somebody kills her and says that she kills herself. It's a bit unclear there, but she is not having a good time as she is dead now, but has been feeling a lot of guilt about all of this. Eventually, the army attacks and lays waste to much of Macbeth's forces, and Macbeth is in his castle when Macduff shows up and is like, "Ha! Nobody can kill me because the only person who can kill me is someone not born of a woman," to which Macduff gloats and says, "Hey, I was a C-section, so I guess that proves your friend's wrong," or it proves your friend's right in some weird way. And then Macduff beheads Macbeth and shows it to everyone, and everyone's like, "Cool, that's great." And then Malcolm is crowned king as the story comes to a close, and it's presumed that Banquo is going to leave a bunch of heirs to the throne in the future anyway. In terms of analysis, there is a fair bit to talk about. Shakespeare provides a lot to think about. I think Macbeth is one of those stories that's infused with a lot of emotion, especially for the play. Especially on Macbeth's part, if you were to act as Macbeth, it'd be a very fun role to play, a very meaty role to play, because there's so much guilt and sadness and grief and paranoia that you could bring to it. I personally, if I were ever acting in a play, I'd want to be playing Macbeth. But one of the ideas that Shakespeare is talking about is ambition. It seems like a sort of cautionary tale about ambition here, but because both Macbeth and his wife want to plot to take the throne. Lady Macbeth is probably more like of a believer in that this can happen. She's more aggressive about it, and that she sees power and wants it at any cost. Projecting some of her own desires upon her husband, because at this time, women can hold a lot of power, and so maybe she's using her husband to obtain power in some sort of way. And Macbeth has a lot of doubts about this. He doesn't want to betray his king. It would look really bad, and just in general, it makes him feel uneasy. And there's a really good quote about this that I would like to read to you. "Besides, this Duncan hath borne his faculties so meek, hath been so clear in his great office, that his virtues will plead like angels trumpet-tongued against the deep damnation of his taking off, in pity like a naked newborn babe striding the blast, or heaven's cherubim horsed upon the sightless couriers of the air, shall blow the horrid deed in every eye, that tears shall drown the wind. I have no spur to prick the sides of my intent, but only vaulting ambition, which o'erleaps itself and falls on the other." And I think that's a good quote because it shows that, Macbeth isn't really sure if he wants to kill King Duncan, if he wants to do all of this and set these things in motion. And I think he talks about deep damnation, which I'm going to be condemned to hell if I kill this person, not out of defense, but out of greed and out of ambition itself. But as we see, Lady Macbeth kind of goads him. She says, "You're kind of a chicken. You're not very manly if you're not willing to take what is rightfully yours, what could be yours, with just stabbing somebody." This really shows how what I think Shakespeare is getting at is the dangers of ambition, how ambition can spiral out of control, because it's not going to just stop with King Duncan. Killing him is a big act in itself. So in doing so, Macbeth has to keep justifying this, and he has to kill Banquo to make sure that he doesn't betray him, even though Banquo's not going to do that, and to make sure that the Banquo as part of the prophecy isn't fulfilled. And then he has to kill Macduff, because Macduff might try to come against him. And then he has to fight this army this war that he's started in doing all of that. And so ambition rises up and up and up, and it grows out of control, and you have a bunch of problems that Macbeth has to deal with now, all because he sought a throne that wasn't really his to seek in the first place. And you have a question here that I think is good, and you can answer it out there if you want. But who is to blame in this situation? Who is to blame for this ambition? You could argue, I think, both Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. Lady Macbeth, obviously, because she goads her husband into doing this. She's like, you have to absolutely do this, and it seems to be her decision. But you could also blame Macbeth, because he is not a victim here. Nobody held a knife to him and said, "Hey, you got to kill these people." He willingly chose to go along with Lady Macbeth, and then he chose to kill Banquo, and then kill Macduff's family. It didn't seem like those people were really turning against him until it was pretty clear that Macbeth had become a tyrant. So I think there's a little bit of blame to share, but it's definitely probably more Macbeth's doing, because he kind of allows all of this to happen, kind of makes a conscious decision to go along with Lady Macbeth. Another thing worth talking about here that I think Shakespeare does really well is the characterization of Lady Macbeth. She seems to be full of ambition and desire for power. As I noted earlier, that might be her projecting something, she's power hungry herself and knows she can't get that power, and so she's seeking it by kind of manipulating her husband into going along with this plan. It seems like she doesn't really feel sad about what she's doing. She's like, oh, we absolutely have to do this. And after the deed happens, she's like, okay, we just got to keep quiet and everything can go our way. It seems like she's more in control than her husband in this situation. Cool, calm, and collected, a cold-blooded murderer, or something like that. She's just like, be quiet, we can get away with this if we want. We don't have to feel guilty. We just have to use our power to our advantage now. And I do think she also recognizes the consequences more so than her husband, because again, if word gets out, everyone's immediately going to turn against her. But after she kills, or after they kill Macduff's family, Lady Macbeth is also very aware what's going to happen, that everyone's going to turn against her. But also she realizes the blood on her hands of having seen the death of her son, of Macduff's son, but also Lady Macduff. So like she recognizes the consequences, and it's definitely like, oh, a boo-hoo for you kind of moment, because like sure she feels bad, but she allowed all of this to happen in her ambition. I think that really humanizes Lady Macbeth anyways, because she realizes too late that like this seeking of power, this ambition has turned against her in a very negative way. It's definitely kind of ruined her life. And it also gives way her death gives way to one of the more amazing quotes in this play, where after she dies, Macbeth is like, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps at this petty pace. Him kind of realizing that it's all for nothing, but also it's too late. This is a sunk cost for him. Like he has to see this through now, even if it means his own death, which he doesn't feel is going to happen at this point. But he's so paranoid that he has to keep going along and killing as many people as possible in order to maintain his hold on this kingdom. Another interesting element of this story is prophecy. Shakespeare's no rookie when it comes to foreshadowing and prophecy and those things, as they appear in a lot of his stories. But the story here seems to be initiated by a witch's prophecy. Basically, the witch is saying, hey, Macbeth, you're going to be king, and your friend Banquo is going to he's going to give way to the other heirs of England down the road. So prophecy seems to be a big thing here. It's helpful, but of course Macbeth is cautious because he doesn't know if how he's going to become king, if it's going to be worth it, if it's going to be good, or if it's going to even help him to try to usurp King Duncan in this scenario. And that's good. Like if someone tells you like, oh, I can see the future, and you are there at the top, like you should hold that with a bit of caution, because you don't know how you get there. And I think maybe Shakespeare is trying to say a little bit like be careful of people who can see the destination, because it prevents you from understanding the journey and what happens along the way. You might make a few mistakes there. And Shakespeare is also urging you, or like cautioning you about the dangers of following a prophecy without really asking questions, because it seems like the witches are purposely being vague, especially if you recall the scene where Hecate shows up and is like, you really shouldn't have told Macbeth that he was going to climb to the throne. Like next time he shows up, definitely be as vague and unhelpful as possible, indicating that the witches might be a little bit evil, or that no one person should know too much about their own destiny. And so when Macbeth shows up and is told that like, oh, a wood is going to come to you, and no man born of a woman will be able to kill you. Like he just assumes that that the danger's over, like that he has everything, or he knows everything that he needs to know, and there's no real like danger to his throne. But of course, those witches are vague, and if you rely on that prophecy, you can't make the necessary preparations to prevent your death or something bad from happening. So Macbeth is very much a victim of that prophecy, of following the prophecy without asking questions. And I think that's really quality writing on Shakespeare's part, which not a lot of people, like I knew about it going in, but I think not a lot of people knew about it, and it's a little fun little twist in the story. There are other interesting elements of this story, including Macbeth's guilt that he feels as he slowly slaughters everyone around him in his rise to the throne. And I do like how Shakespeare includes that and sees him growing more paranoid. It's not just, like Macbeth's suddenly guilt or feeling guilty now, or like he's paranoid about everything around him. It's a slow descent into madness, which is really quality writing. I also like Macduff in this story, particularly how he laments that he has to kill his friend now, because he especially says to Malcolm in the story, like, we loved Macbeth. He was like akin to us. He was a friend to us. But unfortunately, after being this terrible tyrant and killing my father, like we have to kill him. I don't want to do this, and we can hold him prisoner if he's willing to surrender, but he's not going to surrender. So it's not just good guys versus bad guys. There's a little bit of added emotion in this story. I do wish Shakespeare had elaborated on that, but it's pretty solid where it is now. And then of course it's necessary to talk about the historical background of this story, how This seems to be a little bit of commentary on, I believe, King James, who took over the throne around the time Shakespeare was writing this. I think King James was a little bit unpopular, and this is basically Shakespeare maybe making some political commentary, saying this guy, he must have rose to the throne with the help of witches or something like that. And also the idea of Banquo is seen as a predecessor to King James. So maybe an explanation for the origins of this person and the politics of how they're ruling right now and how they might be a little bit unpopular because of that. I don't know too much about that historical moment, but I thought that was really interesting. That's certainly not the first time that Shakespeare has done that. But it's interesting how it's incorporated here. Anyway, so those are my thoughts on Macbeth by William Shakespeare. A pretty solid play. Definitely one that's worth checking out just to get an understanding of Shakespeare's work and also see how it might have influenced other writings. Because I do think Macbeth is one of those like Julius Caesar and like Romeo and Juliet. It's kind of a template that a lot of people have followed in the in terms of story writing in the years since. And like when we talk about the dangers of ambition, we often refer to Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. So definitely seek it out. I'll put a link to it in the comments because there is a free version that you can find. If you have anything to say about this or you want to comment on something I said in my review, do so below. I would love to hear from you. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about this play or this author if they don't already know. And I have a feeling, again, a lot of people might already know. And join the Discord too if you want to have a further conversation about plays and Shakespeare and whatnot. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and strangely ambitious travels. Farewell.